It's one of the best love songs, I believe, to be written in 50 or 100 years, and it never says, I love you in the song, but it really is one of the finest.
Entire careers have been built on singing about romance, heartbreak, and longing. And few did it better than Frank Sinatra. With his unmistakable voice and effortless charm, Old Blue Eyes became one of the definitive interpreters of love songs. Across several decades, Sinatra established himself as one of the most influential vocalists in popular music history, delivering timeless classics that explored every shade of human emotion. Whether he was singing about newfound love, devastating heartbreak, or the bittersweet memories of relationships long gone, Sinatra possessed a rare ability to make every lyric feel deeply personal. Even so, there was one act whose grasp of romance impressed him enough to tip his hat: the Beatles. At first glance, that admiration might seem surprising. Sinatra and the Beatles represented two vastly different eras of popular music. Sinatra emerged from the big band tradition and became the soundtrack of a generation long before rock and roll transformed the musical landscape. The Beatles, meanwhile, arrived as the youthful faces of a cultural revolution, changing not only music, but fashion, art, and society itself. Yet, despite these differences, Sinatra recognized something exceptional in their songwriting, particularly in one song that would ultimately earn some of the highest praise he ever gave to a contemporary composition. Pop music was built upon pithy, lung songs, so it makes sense that the early days of the Beatles were largely dominated by teeny-bopper love songs. The likes of I Wanna Hold Your Hand and She Loves You were catchy enough to make the band a household name across the UK and Europe, with Paul McCartney and John Lennon proving a commendable ability to write timeless and universal love songs. Those early compositions captured youthful excitement with remarkable efficiency. They were simple, direct, and instantly memorable. Their lyrics revolved around themes that virtually anyone could understand: falling in love, yearning for affection, and celebrating romance. It was precisely this accessibility that helped propel Beatlemania to unprecedented heights. Millions of listeners connected with the emotional honesty embedded within these songs, even if the lyrical ideas themselves appeared straightforward on the surface. Before too long, though, the songwriters were keen to explore other avenues of songwriting inspiration. As their fame expanded and their experiences broadened, Lennon and McCartney began searching for deeper artistic challenges. The simple love song formulas that had brought them worldwide success no longer felt sufficient. Both writers were growing rapidly, influenced by literature, experimentation, changing social attitudes, and their own evolving perspectives on life. Rather than repeating the same themes endlessly, they sought to push popular music into new territory. After all, it was the Beatles' sonic diversity and expansive songwriting style that helped to make them such an iconic and enduring band. Love Me Do soon gave way to mind-altering psychedelic explorations, with Lennon particularly keen to move away from teenage romanticism into something more profound and mature. This was the motivation that fostered groundbreaking records like Revolver and Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club. Those albums transformed expectations of what a pop group could achieve. Songs became more ambitious, arrangements more sophisticated, and lyrical subjects increasingly complex. The Beatles explored identity, memory, spirituality, loneliness, and social observation. Their music evolved from straightforward entertainment into a form of artistic expression that rivaled the ambitions of contemporary literature and cinema. Throughout it all, though, the band never strayed too far away from loved-up romanticism. No matter how experimental they became, love remained one of the central themes in their catalog. It simply matured alongside them. Instead of depicting romance through the lens of teenage infatuation, they began exploring deeper and more nuanced emotional experiences. Love was no longer merely about holding hands or receiving affection. It became a vehicle for expressing devotion, vulnerability, uncertainty, and personal connection. Lennon might have resented the inclusion of love songs towards the end of the band's reign, but the other band members were still keen to flex their romantic muscles. This continued source of inspiration ended up producing some of the band's most beloved anthems, such as McCartney's I Will or Here, There, and Everywhere. One of the Fab Four's most prominent love songs, however, came much later on in their tenure. By the late 1960s, tensions within the band were increasing. Personal differences, business disputes, and creative disagreements were beginning to pull the group apart. Yet, paradoxically, some of their most enduring music emerged during this turbulent period. Even as the foundations of the Beatles were beginning to crack, individual members continued producing extraordinary work. George Harrison's songwriting was consistently underrated within the Beatles, despite the fact that the Here Comes the Sun writer clearly had a knack for telling universal stories within his writing. For years, Harrison had struggled to gain equal footing with Lennon and McCartney. As two of the most celebrated songwriting partners in history, they naturally dominated the group's output. This often left Harrison with limited opportunities to showcase his own compositions. Yet, whenever he was given space, he repeatedly demonstrated remarkable talent. Songs such as If I Needed Someone, While My Guitar Gently Weeps, and Taxman revealed a songwriter with a unique perspective and a growing confidence. Unlike Lennon's raw introspection or McCartney's melodic optimism, Harrison often brought a sense of spirituality, contemplation, and emotional subtlety to his work. On Abbey Road, as the band imploded around him, Harrison penned the timeless classic Something, which still goes down as one of the Beatles' finest efforts, awash with romanticism and love. Released in 1969, Something quickly distinguished itself as one of the standout moments on Abbey Road. The song represented Harrison at the peak of his creative powers, combining a beautiful melody with lyrics that felt both intimate and universal. It was sophisticated without being complicated, emotional without becoming sentimental. Part of the appeal lies in how restrained it is. Whereas many love songs lean on grand declarations and sweeping sentiment, Something feels far more conversational. The song never attempts to overwhelm the listener with exaggerated expressions of affection. Instead, it succeeds through suggestion and understatement. Harrison leaves room for interpretation, allowing listeners to project their own experiences and emotions onto the lyrics. That subtle approach gives the song a timeless quality that many more dramatic love songs fail to achieve. Harrison never overplays his hand, which gives the track a quiet confidence, which, it has to be said, has helped it age remarkably well. More than half a century later, it still sounds wonderfully sincere. Its emotional honesty remains striking. The song feels genuine because it avoids cliches and empty declarations. Rather than insisting on its importance, it allows its beauty to emerge naturally through melody, performance, and atmosphere. The result is a composition that feels as fresh and moving today as it did upon release. Something quickly became a fan favorite, renowned for its intimate nature, which perfectly reflected the appeal of Harrison as a songwriter. In the wake of its release, the track was covered by everybody from Shirley Bassey to Elvis Presley. The sheer number of artists who chose to record the song speaks volumes about its quality. Musicians from vastly different genres found something compelling within Harrison's composition. It transcended stylistic boundaries, appealing equally to pop singers, rock performers, jazz interpreters, and traditional vocalists. One of the biggest supporters of Something was Frank Sinatra, who loved the song so much that he chose to incorporate his own version of Harrison's composition into his live show. For Harrison, this endorsement carried enormous significance. Sinatra was not simply another admirer, he was one of the most respected vocal interpreters of the 20th century. His approval effectively placed Something within the same conversation as the great standards that had defined popular music for generations. Reflecting on the appeal of the love song, Sinatra is quoted as saying,
It's one of the best love songs I believe to be written in 50 or 100 years, and it never says, I love you in the song, but it really is one of the finest.
High praise indeed, particularly for a performer who initially dismissed the Beatles, along with the entirety of rock and roll music. For Sinatra to speak about a Beatles song in those terms carried particular weight. He was a performer who had built much of the modern love song template long before Lennon and McCartney had picked up guitars. By the late 1960s, popular music was increasingly being driven by younger artists, yet Sinatra recognized something timeless in Harrison's writing, something that didn't come easily to old Blue Eyes. What impressed Sinatra most was likely the song's sophistication. Something communicated profound affection without relying on obvious romantic language. It captured the feeling of love rather than merely describing it. That distinction elevated the composition beyond the conventions of pop songwriting and placed it closer to the standards Sinatra had spent decades performing. Sinatra was old school in his approach to music. He disapproved of rock and roll immensely, regularly criticizing Elvis Presley and expressing his animosity towards the period of the British invasion, which the Beatles led. He often viewed much of contemporary popular music as fleeting and lacking the elegance of the traditional standards era. Rock and roll represented a cultural shift that many artists of his generation struggled to embrace. Yet even Sinatra could not ignore exceptional songwriting when he encountered it. Seemingly, though, George Harrison's incredible songwriting was enough to change that perception. In many ways, Sinatra's admiration for "Something" serves as one of the greatest compliments any Beatles song ever received. It demonstrated that Harrison had achieved something remarkably rare. He had written a love song capable of bridging generations, musical styles, and artistic philosophies. A composition born in the final chapter of the Beatles' story managed to earn the respect of one of the most iconic singers who had ever lived. More than 50 years later, Sinatra's assessment still feels justified. "Something" remains one of the most beloved songs in the Beatles' catalog, celebrated for its elegance, sincerity, and emotional depth. While countless love songs have come and gone since 1969, Harrison's masterpiece continues to stand apart, proving that sometimes the most powerful expressions of love are the ones that never need to say the words "I love you" at all.